And I learnt about this thing called the Rayid method, which was developed by Denny. So I'd like to share that with you today. So first of all, this is a human eye, a side view, and the iris is the little coloured part in the middle of the eyes. And many of you have looked at many irises throughout your life, and although I'm sure that you all get a rich sense of feeling about what you're looking at, I'm here to put it into plain English. But understand, this is the bit of the human being that I'm talking about when I say iris. Okay, this is a human being, and this is the vehicle that we all have one of, and I believe it's what we're here to do with it is to learn. Okay, and the way we learn is we inhabit this realm called Earth, this physical realm, and the way it works, in my view, is that we get energy from the source, comes to our body. It's what motivates us, it's what animates us, it's what supplies us with the wherewithal to have a life. As far as the body itself goes, it gets its energy or its nurturing from Mother Earth. So this human being that we have experiences life through interactions with other things, chiefly in our environment, but principally as far as our personality goes, it's interactions with other human beings that I think are the most formative and most definitive things that we go through to experience life. Okay. Now these interactions are what make up our life's lessons. We've all learnt stuff through our interactions with somebody else. And they also create our learning opportunities, our opportunities to become a more informed, wiser, better person. And it's these interactions that what I suggest colour our life, that make our life rich and in many different ways, some of which we interpret as positive, some which we interpret as negative, but they're all part and parcel of life in the body. And as we mature, these colours that we develop through our interactions define our personality, our strengths and our challenges, our weaknesses, and basically who we are. And by the time we reach adulthood, which I'm saying is around our late teens, by adulthood I mean when the physical body has matured, and I believe the physical body matures around about 20, the emotional body matures around about 30, the mental body matures around about 40, and the spiritual body matures around about 50. So it's really only until you get to 50 that you're in charge of a mature human being. And once you get to that place where things are black and white, life then changes to becoming not so much purely learning and acquiring new information, but also letting go of stuff that's outdated and doesn't serve you anymore. So life is about letting go of old stuff, shutting doors, opening doors, cleaning out cupboards, putting new stuff in cupboards, and that's what I call the process of evolution. And what I'm suggesting is that the process of your individual path, your individual evolution, is written in your eyes. And the interesting thing is that most of the information is there at birth, even though most of the experiences it describes will not happen for years to come. So what I'm suggesting is that the iris, and this is a blow-up of an iris, is a blueprint. And it consists of lots of fibres, it consists of different layers. You can see a bit of a shadow there. Different levels and fibres that describe how the energy gets from the source to the outside world, how it passes through the body and you express it. It also describes the distribution of these fibres, and colours describe events, incidents, tendencies that you will experience in life and your reaction to them, and often who's the person who's going to gift you with that experience, painful as it may be. Here's a proper iris, the full thing. The way I look at it is the energy comes from the source, and that's why it's black in the middle, because we are unable to discern much about it. The energy then passes through this map, this blueprint we call the iris, and it's expressed in the outside world, which is represented by the sclera, or the white part of the eye. And what I'm here to do is to describe how that the patterns in there tell us stuff about ourselves. Now, normally, okay. Now, part of this, by the way, is a picture of a drop of water that's sitting on a metal plate with light shining through it, and the plate's being vibrated. I don't know if you've seen this kind of thing before. And as the frequency of the vibration changes, the pattern in the drop of water, where it concentrates the light and where the light is diminished, changes. And that's a parallel for what I believe we're like. As the energy passes through us, we have channels where we prefer it to go, and we have areas that we'd rather not have to deal with, so we try to move the energy around those areas without getting too involved with them. But that's just a parallel to how I see the iris. The iris is a description of how the vibrations move through us and how we choose to embrace them or utilise them. Okay, here's a much more photoshopped picture of the iris, and you can really see how there are different layers. There's a layer down here, and then superimposed over the top is like this sort of net light, but it's another layer, and you can see the shadows quite clearly on how the light is over here shining across it like that. And so just understand that we're not looking at a two-dimensional thing, we're looking at very much a three-dimensional thing. But this is the stuff that I'm talking about. These radial fibres, typically white, going straight out. There's not much weaving or complication, and in some areas they reach the periphery of the eye, and in other areas they appear to stop short. This relates to the physical body. We've all got these fibres. They're not obvious in some eyes, but if you've got a physical body, your irises have got this in it. For some people, there is another layer superimposed on top, and that's this layer of fibres that look like almost flower petals, or heavy concentrations of white streaming towards the edge. And as you can see, they're very non-uniform. It's above the base layer, so it has more influence on your personality and on your life, on your behaviour. As I say, there are areas where the fibres aren't, and there are areas where they're concentrated. Here there's a lot of concentration of fibre, and in these places there's none. So they would describe areas the individual prefers the energy to be, and areas they prefer the energy not to be, or not to experience, not to be aware of. And this relates to the emotional body. So if your eye looks like this, then I would describe you as an emotionally oriented person. And then you get irises like this. And it's hard looking after that flower. The features I'm talking about, again, you can see those radial fibres below on the base layer. But there are two features in this. One of these are these dark blobs over the top, and this is the top layer in the iris. I can't see any of the emotional layer there, but if it was, it would be between this layer and this layer. And these blobs, and this is a lot, you don't often see irises with this much, and they vary from like very pale, almost light dustings, to thick bituminous tar-like globs. And just for the past lives, these generally describe lessons that have accumulated over up to 4 lifetimes. And the density of the colour indicates how many lifetimes that issue has been part of the life. So this is an issue that's been around for generations in that family. And the darker they are, the harder they are to shift. And the darker they are, I could talk to the person about what that meant as an issue. Everybody else in the room would go, oh yes, that's exactly right. And they would go, what are you talking about? Everybody's like that, aren't they? It's so much part of their fabric that they don't, it's below awareness. Okay, back to the base layer. If your eyes look like this, is what I call the stream type. People whose eyes look like this are basically very active. They love exercise. These are the people who will run miles and miles and miles, and they think it's fabulous. And there are people like me that go, what, you would exercise for no purpose? Okay. They're very stable. Without these people in the human race, we would have blown ourselves to bits a long time ago. They're the people that hold it steady. They're the intuitives amongst us. They're in touch. They communicate with touch. They learn through touch. They learn with their bodies. They're great mediators. Because they're in touch with both sides of the situation, and they're able to bring people together who can't see each other's point of view. Some of them are subtle people. But, sorry, that was supposed to be a joke, wasn't it? Okay, they're very, and the subtlety is because most people find it very difficult to read this iris. The information's there that's in the other, you remember the flower and or the ones that are coming up, is much easier to see. It jumps out at your face. And the same information is there in here, but it's much harder to see. And so that manifests in the personality as being quite subtle. And they're sensitive. Because they're in touch, they're very sensitive people. These people, their learning path, how they evolve most, is through change, letting go of tradition. The attitude here is that if it was good enough for my parents and my grandparents, it's good enough for me. Things change, they learn, they grow, they evolve. This is the flower personality. Characterised again, you've seen these before, these petal-shaped openings in a layer of fibre superimposed over the base fibre. Here you can see that base level through there, through the gaps. And this describes someone who lives life more through their emotions, or more with their emotions. Their emotions are the principal interface with the human, with their environment, and so they're reactive. Emotions are very quick to respond. And these flowers love to change. Flowers are the kind of people that we're going out tonight, I'll just put on this outfit, and I look in the mirror and, that's not right. I'm not presenting the right image. I'll go and change it. And it can take like 5 or 6 changes of clothes before they're happy. And really then they're not happy, it's just they've run out of time. So they're change-oriented, they're expansive, they're outgoing, they tend to find it easy to communicate, and they're visual communicators. That's why the clothes they're wearing is so important. To a jewel, the clothes they're wearing is so unimportant, it's ridiculous. To a flower, it's so important. Flowers also learn through their ears. They learn by hearing. And flowers, I've taught many flowers that have difficulty studying to read it out aloud. And as soon as they start hearing what they're reading, they learn. But when they just read silently, it's like, means nothing to them because it's visual input, and they only really deal with auditory input. They can express themselves visually. This is the jewel. Jewels tend to be control-oriented. And the way I look at this is that as the energy passes through them, they express the energy, there are areas where it kind of clogs up and doesn't get let go of. And they end up feeling they have to control things, because the only way you can really trap energy is to control it. You either express it or avoid it or control it. And these, as I say, are areas, the darker they are, the longer it's been around in the gene pool, their particular gene pool. Control-oriented, analytical. These people communicate verbally and they learn visually. These people learn by watching. So if they close their eyes and listen to something, it doesn't go in. They need to see something. These people also learn through allowing and letting go of the need to control, going with the flow. There is one more type, which is like a combination type. You can see there's the base level fibres, you can see the flower layer or the emotional layer, you can also see evidence of jewels. So the 3 layers are present in these eyes, and we call that a shaker. Shakers they're like the tip of the spear. Shakers always, the reaction of a shaker to any situation is, I can improve it. It can be done better. That's just who they are. They're there to make things better. They're the complementary of the stream. The stream loves stability and let's keep things stable and keep on going. The shaker is the other part, is like, no, let's make things better. Because of that, they come across as unpredictable to many people, because who knows where they will observe the opportunity for improvement. They tend to be vital, dynamic, because they are driven to make things better. And it's not easy in this world to be a proponent of improvement. Okay, they're zealous, they're often committed people, committed to whoever or whatever they focus on. They achieve things, and they learn through touch. If you want to get your message through to a shaker, it's best just to walk up to them and just touch them on the elbow or the shoulder. This is the safest place to touch most people, and just say, look, I'd like to tell you this, you need to give me all your money. They just did, yeah. Okay. And they learn through being still and connecting with the body, kinesthetic. Okay. So they're the 4 types. Now what I want to talk about, we're all aware of there's 2 hemispheres in the brain. Yeah. And they have different characteristics. If you behave in a right hemisphere dominant way, certain things happen, as opposed to left. So the left hemisphere is connected to the right iris. So this iris in me will tell me information about my left hemisphere, and you as well. There's like a crossover. The right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body. You familiar with that? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So that's that bit. So most of you probably know this, but just to run briefly through it, the left hemisphere is practical, it's involved with the past, it's involved with control, it's more masculine energy, it focuses on the material, physical, the accumulation of stuff. Everything is unique. There's that, and they're different. It questions, it denies, tends to be happy with female avoidance. Causes and things that fire it up are personal, what I'm going to get out of it. It's really the I, me, mine hemisphere. Whereas the right hemisphere is more conceptual, focuses on the future, it's the feminine hemisphere, more philosophical, has a more holistic viewpoint, tends to be agreeable, allowing, avoids males. Okay. So how do we see it in the eyes? Basically, the hemisphere, as far as your genetic disposition goes, your hemisphere, the iris that has the more markings, the more energy, that looks more impactful, is the dominant hemisphere genetically. So in this one, it's very easy to see that this iris has got more going on in it than this one. Yes? Yeah. Okay, so we can say this is a dominant iris, and it's the right eye. The irises are always as if they were in the person's head looking at you, so this is always the right eye, right iris. So this is left brain dominant. Okay? And we can say that it's because they had a lot more going on with the mother than they did with the father, if you like. Wow. It's the mother that teaches. The mother's interactions with the child are engraved in this iris, and the father and male relatives is engraved in this iris.
This is so fascinating. I find that really fascinating that you can tell that from...
Oh, it gets better than it.
Well, I've just got to make lots of notes.
Okay, there's a book here, just by the way, that Denny wrote this, called What the Eye Reveals, and that's all about the Rayid method. So that's what it likes. And jewels are often the easiest to tell because jewels are easiest to see in this regard and to count. That's a flower, it's easy to see, but if you just look at those eyes, how many people believe that there's more going on in this iris than that one? feel the, like, which one's talking to you the loudest, if you like?
That right?
This one?
Yeah.
Great. Well, you're all now non-accredited Rayid practitioners.
Yeah.
Because this is indeed the dominant iris. And the real is because there's more flowers, simply by number, just right brain dominant iris. And that's the way they came in. But the thing is that just as we walk, if you want to get anywhere in life, you've got to walk. And you have to use both legs. And so it is with human beings. What we eventually find is that we have to use both our hemispheres. Otherwise we get stuck, or we hop through life. And if you imagine that, it's like you don't get very far. So we need to learn to change the hemispheres. And there are many ways to do that. But life, when we don't do it voluntarily, life has a way of doing it for us. So hemispheric movement, a pattern is developed in the first 7 years. Imagine there the first 7 years, and you start off left brain dominant, and then something happens and you move over to being more right brain dominant, and so on. That describes what I call a signature pattern of hemispheric movement. And it's engraved in your body. And you can try this if you like. The first thing is at birth, the genetic disposition is basically the structure of the iris. That's the only indication we have at birth. But before you're a year old, your facial structure, the bone structure of your face, will have ended up looking more like your mother's side or your father's side. And that is an indication of where you were dominance-wise in your first year. So if your face looks more like your mother's side, that basically means you were right brain dominant at that time in your life. Okay, then if you all close your hand, can you clasp your hands? Whose right thumb is on top? Your left thumb's underneath, so it means right thumb on top, right brain dominant at that age.
At 3.
At 3, yeah.
Somebody said something about this recently, got us to do that, and it was crossing our arms.
Yeah, next one's crossing.
Putting your right over your left, and they said, well, is that similar or is that?
Yeah, it's similar. It starts off, the fixation or the patterning starts at the fingers.
Yeah.
So that comes first. The next thing is where your arms cross.
Right.
And if you cross your arms, you'll find that one way's good, but the other way, it really feels like funny. So the reason is that is because that was patterned mainly due to the dominance of your hemispheres at that age, about 3 to 5. And so the dominant arm is the one that's underneath. If you can feel, there's one arm that's holding the other one, the other arm's just resting on it. So this is the dominant arm. So when I was like 3 to 5, I was left brain dominant. But when I close my thumbs like that, I'm right brain dominant at the age of 1 to 3. So something happened to me between 1 and 5 that made me change hemispheres. And similarly, round about this stage, it works from the top down, the face, the fingers, the arms, and the legs are the last. And when you cross your legs, the dominant one's on top. But I don't find this very reliable. Most people have spent so much time sitting down these days and crossing their legs that they've lost the patterning, I think. But anyway, that's just to show you that the pattern that we develop in our first 7 years, and it replays. This pattern becomes fixed in you, and it's how you treat each 7-year pattern, how you treat each year, how you respond to any fixed project, how basically you start off with, if it's like that, any project, somebody says, okay, I want you to look after this job for us, start off left brain, which means you're going to organise, you're going to blah, blah, blah. And then you get a little way through it, and then suddenly it'll be, oh no, the social aspects are more important. We need to talk to the people who are going to be involved. We need to be more creative. And that'll last for a while, and you go back to left brain, and no, we need to worry about funding and finances, and has this been done before, how we did it in the past, and then how we're going to do it in the future, and so on. And that's great. If you understand that, that's fabulous. Because the problem with, or not the problem, but the things that these are very, the crossover from left to right is usually accompanied by a lot of trauma. If you don't go voluntarily, you're going to be pushed or kicked. And when life does that, it doesn't usually feel very good. So these are often intense periods of intensity in your life. And if you look at it, I'm sure you'll find that if you can map out your first 7 years, and then you look at, like, if something happened to you at 3.5, it will also happen to you at 10.5, or a similar kind of, not the same event, but a similar kind of impetus and experience. And if you can identify that then, and you can identify your signature wave, then it'll often help you understand when these crossovers come, how to go willingly with it and reduce the stress in your life. Because what life uses to move us from hemisphere to hemisphere, and for example, this is a left to the right movement, is attraction to females. So it might be a new relationship starting and you go, wow, oh, that feels great. Or suddenly becoming more interested in the future. And it doesn't need to be a positive experience. If your doctor tells you you've got 6 months to live, that's going to take you right into the future immediately. So it's going to take you right into your right brain. Social involvement, any time we get involved in a group, it tends to stimulate the right brain more. That's movement towards. If you don't go with that voluntarily, life will start to use pain, the cattle prod, and it'll be pain with males, finances, with the past, with being alone, with all those kind of left brain kind of things. Next thing I want to talk about is energetic disposition. Introversion and extroversion is what it's called in Rayid, but it's different. The way I use these words are different to what everybody else in psychology uses introversion and extroversion. Basically, an extrovert is somebody who is more relating to the energy outside them. An introvert is more aware of what's going on inside them. Introverts tend to gather and store life energy and awareness. An introvert's quite happy to sit in the corner of the room, talk to nobody and have a great party because they just experienced a rich inner world. Whereas if an extrovert did that, they'd be nuts within a couple of minutes. An introvert can walk through a room and nobody even notices them come and go. Whereas an extrovert opens the door and everybody goes, who's that? Yeah. Simply because an extrovert's energy field is out there. An introvert's energy field is within them. So unless you're looking for it or you're trained, you won't notice the introvert, you will notice the extrovert. So an extrovert has a lot bigger involvement and influence in society than an introvert. But when it comes to perception, an introvert has a lot better and richer perception of what's around them than an extrovert. Simply because an introvert is more aware of their reaction, their response, what's going on inside themselves, and their response to what's around them than an extrovert. An extrovert doesn't matter what's going on inside them, it's just what's going on around them. And as long as they're the centre of attention, everything's hunky-dory. This is the eye of an extrovert. Can you feel that? Like that eye's coming out of the screen at you? Yeah. And it's like, here I am. Just describe it. What I'm looking at is called the ring of expression. And just to show you that, that's where the yellow line is the ring of expression, and this blue line, which is the periphery of that soul layer, is what I call a point of balance. If your ring of expression is outside that, that describes extroversion. If it's inside it, it's introversion. Now, the gifts of the extrovert are, they're very forthright because they put themselves out there. They're social, they're practical, they're achievers, and they're manifestors. What they need to learn, their tasks in life are stillness. They need to respect other people's attitudes, life, reactions. They need to develop patience Because for an extrovert, it's what's in here should be out there. Now, and if I feel like warm, everything should be warm immediately. And they need to learn self-autonomy, that they are independent of their environment, that their environment is not what determines their experience of life. They're in charge of their life. The effects of having extroversion or being an extrovert is that it increases communication, because it's a lot easier to get your message out there. It's a lot easier because your energy is naturally flowing out. Conversely, it decreases sensitivity. It's a lot harder for messages to get into you from the environment. And it also increases honesty and directness, the forthrightness. So again, that's an eye that's easy to see. An introvert, now if you can just feel the difference in the eye, is like, that's like closed doors, if you like. I look at them and I go, what's happening? It's an eye, I know, but what's it saying to me? Okay? So again, and the ring of expression, you can't really see it from easily, but it's right in on the pupil. Around there like that. I'll just show you that. So it's almost wholly inside that. An introversion brings its gifts of sensitivity, congeniality. The reason is that an introvert knows that they want to feel good inside, and the best way to do it is to make sure that the energy around them that they're gathering is good. So as far as other people go, make sure they're feeling good towards you. They're tolerant because they do have an understanding of people's inner space. They're insightful. Introverts need to become more self-expressive, more extroverted. They need to, because they are almost catatonically shy, some of these people, they need to learn to get involved with society and to put themselves and their energy out there. Introverts often find it, like a catatonic introvert will talk to you, and they can talk to you at this volume, but what would happen is their words would come out and just drop to the floor. And although you could hear that they were saying something, it would be difficult for you to get the meaning. So they're basically the three aspects that Traincher will have mentioned to you, I believe. And they're the things that basically make up our overall disposition. Who we are, how easily we communicate with others, whether we're drawn to this or to that, and all the rest of it. However, what I now want to talk about is all these features in the eye appear in certain places in the eye, and it's not without significance, I think is the phrase. So this is the Rayid chart, which is what I use. That's what it looks like in real life. And what it is a map of where in the eye certain, if a feature appears in a certain area, what this chart tells us is the inferences that we can make from that feature appearing in that location. If they're in the right eye, it's male relations that are given us that gift, and conversely in the left eye, it's the mother or the female relations. And certain ones are more triggering than others. And this is a left iris. The yellow ones are the major trigger points, that if you have features in those, they'll be major in your life. And I'm not going to run through them all by any stretch of the imagination, but I will talk about nurturing is the big one. A lot of people have something there, and the lesson it's teaching is about caring. Now, if it's a flower in that area, it means a lack of energy or energy avoidance. So it means that in some way, you as a child will have experienced an inadequacy of caring. Now, what's adequate for one person is not necessarily adequate for another. There is no standard of, you know, if your mother spent 2.5 hours per day with you and touched you 352 times, that's good. That's overabundant for some people, but it's underabundant for others. So what we're talking about is an individual thing. Nurturing, which is number one, is about caring. Number 3, resentment. That's about teaching forgiveness, because the only thing you can do with resentment usefully is to forgive. It's the only way you can let go of resentment. Down here we've got anger, which is a lot about teaching self-control. You'd be familiar with that. Also, just while we're on it, these different coloured bands, and the blue area is the mental issues in here are more influential in the mind. In the red area, they're more influential in the emotions, and in the green area, they're more influential in the physical body and manifesting. So that's another way that we can split up the influence of these patterns: is mental, emotional, physical, that way. Gestation, which is number 8 down here, is a lot about birth. In fact, 9, 10, 11, this area down here really describes your time in the womb, the 9 months in the womb. And looking at this in people's eyes, it's possible to say, identify at what point your mother accepted she was pregnant, at what point she told the father, and then looking over in the other eye, what the father's reaction was.
Wow.
And how it has affected you and you. Okay, down here, this is really the foundation of our attitude to ourself at the bottom. This is all connected with self-esteem, self-respect, all that kind of stuff. The big one is spirit, number 16, and that's really about how much we accept and believe in ourselves. For some people it's not an issue, for other people it's major, and if you've had to work hard to develop self-esteem, you've probably got some marking in there. And again, if it's a jewel, it'll be because there was too much energy in there. Like, for instance, it might be you were heavily criticised and made to feel bad about not being an adequate performer as a child. You know, why did you come second? Why didn't you come first? You know, there's no such thing as second place in my world. Go back out there and train again. Or just, you came second, who cares? You came first, who cares? I've got more important things to do. I've got to check the numbers in the lottery or whatever. And that's a flower kind of thing. Will up here is more to do with the mental, and it's about learning to cooperate. If you've got a strong will, it'll show up in there. And it's hard for strong-willed people to appreciate the best thing they can do with their will is to learn to control themselves or manipulate or force themselves to work with to cooperate with other people. Why should I cooperate? It's up to them to cooperate with me. Okay? So they're just some examples, and I'll just run through the nurturing. Okay. So we're looking at a left eye, right brain. So if there was a mark in here, we'd be looking at the relationship, describing the relationship with the mother. The lesson, so any marking in here is going to be about teaching the evolution of expressing physical love, being of service to other people, to your community, to your children, to your family, and the unconditional giving of the self. And if you've got a jewel in there that you were taught that you had to perform to achieve love, then your pattern is liable to be a workaholic. You'll be issues here teach social grace, being loving, once you learn to have acquired the lesson and learn to express it, you become a lot more welcome in other people's lives and in your community's life, if you like. Also teaches wisdom, knowing what to say and when to say it. The cause of the lesson, or how the lesson is created, is often neglect, lack of caring in the childhood, and it can come through as a lack of discipline, a lack of guidance, just being ignored, or too much discipline, too much guidance, just being beaten for every mistake you make, real or imagined. Inadequate parental attention, or the parental attention had to be earned, had to be performed. If your parents loved you when you made your bed and your room is tidy and just ignored you otherwise, that's the pattern on you. Don't forget, you can take two people and they could have the similar experiences, and one would take it on board and the other one would not.
Yeah.
It's not the experiences, it's the effects on the person and how it has influenced their opportunities for learn, what lessons it has made them open to receiving in life.
So, Fergus, if you have issues with your mother and your father, does that just mean that it'll show up in both eyes?
If it's the same issue, it's major. It'll be a major part of your life and your learning. Because it means there's no one you can turn to and feel safe around that issue. All male, because your father teaches you how to relate to males and what to expect from males, and your mother from females, and if both of them gave you the same stuff, like 2 jewels in the same place, and that's in nurturing, that'd be a lifelong lesson for that person. Okay, the consequences of issues in that area, people tend to withdraw. It's the heart, in the iridology it'd be the heart, but it's this part of your body, it's where we feel love. And so if it's painful for you to do that, you're going to not want to spend time in this area, and you're not going to want to connect with people, which creates withdrawalness, rebelliousness, loneliness, depression. Also difficulty concentrating because you don't feel at home in this most important region of our body, and these days it's called ADHD. Also, issues in this area tend to create a fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of being alone, and strange enough, also a fear of illness, being ill, getting sick. Okay, so that's just one issue in one eye, and it's different with a flower, different with a jewel, different with a flower-jewel combination. So you can start to get an appreciation of how rich we as human beings are in terms of creating, no two of us are alike. Okay, there are features in the eye that are not to do with anything else, but they all are very significant. This is called what I call the ring of harmony, and it's characterised by these white dots. Okay, and it's just a build-up of energy around the periphery, and they can be as far in as here. And what it indicates is a very high connection or sensitivity to the environment. People with this kind of pattern, and both Francha and I have it, very hard to relax on a beach if there's litter on the beach. But people have a strong connection with the environment, and when they're not masters themselves, the environment will determine their inner feeling. The lesson is to learn to impose one's inner feeling on the environment. And once that's been mastered, a person with this pattern can walk through a riot, and behind them there'll be a ripple of calm, just spreading. Yeah. As long as they hold their centre. Yeah. It's like a huge, huge gift, but when you come in, it's a huge burden to bear. And I think that's the human nature, is that all great gifts manifest as a great burden, and it's in learning to overcome the burden that we master the gift. The trait and the personality manifesto, they have very high ideals for people's behaviour. The burden is that they're easily influenced by others because of that connection with the environment. Until they have achieved the centre that they can hold, other people's influence is very potent in determining which way they swing, and so they're easily influenced. And because until they're aware of it, it tends to make them cynical, disappointed. They don't understand why they're so easily tossed and thrown around by things that are beyond their control. And so you get these characteristics of depletion, being worn out with not knowing why, being overwhelmed, disappointed, cynical. The lesson it's teaching is to slow down, develop a centre, rest, care for your inner environment first. Once you do that, then care for the outer environment. And the lesson really is as within, so without. And the gift is one of integrity and influence. Okay, now this ring of purpose And what I'm talking about is this, see how the fibres don't quite reach the periphery. It's like the person's expression of energy, they get it, they express it, they deal with it, they blah, 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 and then before it gets to the outside world, they just kind of like loses interest and doesn't get there. The things that these people will have is a sense of they're special. They're here, they're chosen, they've got a purpose in life, it's really important, but they haven't got a clue what it is. Their life is, my life is a mission, but I've got no idea. I've lost the instruction manual. The burden is these people can be confused, indecisive, they can stagnate easily, or they can be quietly smug as a defence against having to go out in the world feeling you're special, not knowing why, and deal with other people. These are all ways that we develop defences against that. The lesson it's teaching is to be diligent, is to actually persist, is to get the job done, to be committed, to connect with the world. You're going to have to make the effort to connect with the world. Okay, and the gift is poise and calmness and centeredness, is to be able to capitalise on that detachment from the outside world. But once you've learned to make it of your own voluntary efforts, then it becomes a gift for you to be able to stay a lot more centred, independent of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Can I just mention something? I just had a realisation. When I was working in the hospital many, many years ago and somebody would die, the ring of purpose, or just hours before they would die, and that would that dark marking of the ring of purpose would actually travel into where the actual pupil was, all the way through, same colour.
Yep.
And you see when children are born, they've got that dark colour, the navy blue, and there is nothing, and then within 6 weeks it starts showing.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the same thing, and then as soon as people die, it's all that colour. It's like the purpose is gone, and it's amazing to see that.
My interpretation, another way of looking, I'm not saying that's wrong, but is that these fibres describe how we deal with energy when we're alive. Well, before we've learnt to do anything, it's not there. Then as we start to learn how to deal with energy and express ourselves and be ourselves, it grows. Some of us, it reaches the outside world. Some of us, we've got to work harder to make it reach it. But as we start to let go of life, the fibres start to disappear because we're no longer interested in...
The people who are dead, the energy's gone.
Yep.
There is no energy, so it's all back in.
So I don't need the vehicle to express it. This is another one. You can obviously see what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these concentric rings or part rings, and I call it the ring of freedom. It's not my name, it's Denny's name, but basically the way I look at this is it's like a pond. The iris is a pond, and it's got ripples in it because there's just too much energy in that iris for the person to express. These people feel like they're driven. They're achievement oriented, they've got to be doing things, and it just isn't. They try to live a 30-hour day every single day of their life. They can be frenetic, agitated.
That one.
Well, it's here as a lesson. You've evolved. So there's an overwhelming drive to I've got to do more. I've got to get more done. I haven't got enough time today. Blah, blah, blah. And if they become dysfunctional with it, it's very easy to feel helpless. Like they're overwhelmed. It's just I'm failing in life. And it's not they're failing in life, it's just that this drivenness needs to be learned. And the ability is to discern, it's discerning what's appropriate, if you like, common sense or wisdom. That, you know, I'm just one person, there's only so much I can do. If I try and do too much, I'll end up not being able to do anything, that kind of thing. And learn that there's 24 hours in a day, and you need some of them for what you need to do, and the rest is okay for you to do stuff for other people, but put yourself first. Okay, and the gift is the motivation and the ability to produce results, to get things done. This is the ring of determination. That's a very, very strong example. Rarely do you see this in young people, or rarely do I see it in young people. And often it's one of the features of the iris that will grow and develop with age. Often it starts just across the top of the iris and then gradually over many decades spreads around, gets thicker and stronger. And what it is, the way I look at it is, the being or the spirit looks out at the world from the inside, and instead of seeing the white sclera out there, it sees what it thinks is the sclera inside itself. So the person comes to accept that their view of the world is reality, irrespective of how wrong it might be. These people are very very difficult to get a different viewpoint through to them. Very difficult to get even the possibility that there may exist a different viewpoint through to them. And really my approach to somebody like that is to teach them to find stillness within themselves and to assess whether there is a challenge to their health internally, and if so, find your own answer. I can throw lots of stuff at you, but if they don't believe it, they won't come at it, and they've got to find their own answer. Sometimes it'll be an opening round there, and so that here's an approach. You can still get through to them from this angle in life, but when it's like that, they've got to find it themselves. Okay, and that generally is something you see in older people, or I see in older people. Okay, relationships. Now the magic of Rayid is that all that I've told you is juice for relationships that attracts. Because life is about, we experience it through our relationships with other people, how much richer is it to have a live-in relationship that's there all the time and is instantly available for enriching one's life?
We're taking
Okay, this is a room full of single people.
Is this you and Trancher or what?
This is Trancher and that's me. Now there are many attraction mechanisms that form relationships. The principal one is opposites attract, and that might be opposites of structure, like a flower attracting a jewel or a shaker in a stream, and that's a strong bond. That's why you've probably come across couples and you go, they're so different. What is it? Like, they're so different. And that's the reason that they're attracted is because they're so different. It can also, to an extent, come from introversion, an introvert attracting an extrovert. That would be a component of Trancher and I's relation. As you can see, that's an introverted ring of expression, and that's very extroverted. You can also, to an extent, have left-right dominance. The magnetism, the sexual attraction, the potency of attraction comes from the hemispheres. Very hard for a left-brain male to be attracted to a left-brain female. Well, it's just like the two magnets, and they're both in the South Pole. It's like, but if you've got a North Pole and a South Pole, bang, that's what you get. Now the thing, and I'll get into that later. Another attraction is people have similar patterns, and this is largely ours. They're both shakers. Well, you've got similar stuff to deal with in life, so have I. Well, let's join forces. The thing about similars is it's not a strong attraction. They really have to work at it to create kind of magnetism, and very easy to take each other for granted, because well, you're just like me, so what's the deal? Hemispheric switching, I'll talk about that. Again, remember how I talked about how we develop in 7 years a signature pattern? If you find a person of the opposite gender who's got a similar pattern but the mirror of it, that's a very strong attraction. And that makes for a very intense relationship. But there's a couple of challenges for relationships. If you're in a hemispheric switching, what that means is that when one of you switches from left to right, the other one's got to switch from right to left. And it's just like this. It's like two people on a tightrope trying to move past each other. And you've got to get really close, and you've got to hold on, and you've got to trust each other, And you've got to balance and move past each other at the same time as going through an intense emotional situation. So these relationships are absolute fireworks when that's happening. When it's not, they're magnificent things. Okay, the other challenge we have for structural relationships is if there's a flower component and a dual component. The flower is very responsive and quick to change. So when a new idea comes in, we have the flower is very quick to go from, wow, that's a great idea, I want to do that, within seconds. It's like, why don't we buy a jumbo jet and take all our friends around the world? Fabulous, let's do it. I'll look in the yellow pages for jumbo jet. So the dual, on the other hand, is going, oh, don't be stupid. We couldn't afford that. We'd never land it in our driveway at home. You need to have a whole airport to do that, and, you know, where would we afford the fuel, and I can't fly a jet, and blah, 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 blah. So that's the dual. So what happens is the dual goes, no. Well, okay, I'll start collecting data, I'll look at it, I'll analyse it, and eventually we'll, yeah, okay, let's do it. But by that stage, the flower has gone, oh, I'm sick of that idea, I'm bored with that. Why don't we get a boat and sail around the world? Share it.
Okay.
And this is the thing. Whereas the stream just goes, no, yes. That's okay, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So in any relationship that has got that sort of structural bonding, which is most of them, that's one of the challenges. There are many other challenges, but they're the two big ones that most people relate to. They're in a relationship, or have been in a relationship, and can remember what it's like. So this is us. I do Rayid, Trencher does iridology. We do iris photographs, so you can get photographs to take home. One of the things that I've often said to people is, if you want to develop personally or get to know yourself, get your irises. You don't need to learn anything about them, but just spend 5 minutes a day looking at your own irises, and magic will happen in terms of evolution. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Wow, that's so amazing.